What if I told you that the next school shooting is already being planned right now? That the killer is broadcasting his intentions on social media and no one is stopping it? This week, I sat down with Zeev Fragachan, a former IDF officer, school security expert, and fierce advocate for protecting America's children, to ask the questions that nobody wants to answer, but we must. Why has the United States experienced over 2,000 school shootings since Columbine, while countries like Israel report zero? Are social media platforms fueling school shooters, or could they be our best chance to stop them?
It is reprehensible that we have elected officials expecting us to send our kids to schools with nobody can protect them because there's no police, there's no security, there's nothing. We need to prevent the next tragedy, and this is the only way we can do it.
Zeev breaks down the psychological profile of a school shooter. It's not always mental illness, it's something more dangerous. We dive into what happened in Uvalde, Parkland, and the chilling failures of law enforcement. But we don't stop there. We go global to the rise of terrorism, 3D printed guns, digital radicalization inside Roblox and Minecraft, and even Kanye's anti-Semitic lyrics infecting America's youth. This is a call to arms for parents, lawmakers, and every adult in America, because the next future day could be one we never recover from.
Social media is also a platform that we use to early detect them and their intentions, because they go to publish in social media because they need the recognition and they need the exposure.
Zeev, thank you for joining me on this episode of Some Future Day. Zeev, it is such a pleasure to see you. Welcome to Some Future Day.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here.
Zeev, it's a serious topic, and in getting to know you briefly, there's really global comparisons and implications. Americans tend to look within, but I'm curious, why has the United States experienced over 2,000 school shootings since Columbine, while countries like Japan, the United Kingdom, and Germany, with similar levels of media exposure, report virtually no school shootings?
Well, Mark, we need to start at the core of the problem. And I think it's unfair to compare the media in the United States with the media, for example, in Great Britain. Let me tell you that in Great Britain, they take away guns from everybody years ago. Even most of police officers are not even armed. But if you go to the core of a problem, right now, just in 2024, there were 3,200 stabbings in schools alone in the United Kingdom. Unfortunately, by the laws in the United Kingdom, most of that information never made to the media. The names of all 3,200 stabbings, not just the victims, but the people who actually perpetrated, are also kept from the media and from the general public because of what they call fear of retribution to specific groups of people. So it is unfair, I think, to compare one to the other. Again, you mentioned it very well. We tend to see only what happened in the United States and don't see what's going on around the world.
You know, Zeev, the data that I'm sharing is coming, from the government. It's derived from the Center for Homeland Defense and Security, and it runs between, just to be specific for the audience, it runs between 1999 and 2024. You're saying, if I understand correctly, like these perpetrators, like perhaps there's a particular profile and that type of person will use any weapon they could get their hand on. So if I understand correctly, you're saying, okay, in the United Kingdom, you're going back in time where weapons have been removed from the streets, much smaller marketplace. We'll get into that topic as it relates to in America in a second. But you're saying the UK isn't reporting accurately because weapons are weapons and stabbings are just as terrible in the setting of a school as shootings.
Correct. That is exactly what I mean with that. And when I make the analogy is because, and I have this conversation with many people, when they go back to you and why this is only happening in the United States. And this is not. We just miss the point that violence in schools, either if it's a stabbing or when you pull a gun and you actually kill people with that weapon, regardless of the weapon, they're acts of violence, and that is a phenomenon that is not wide understand, and it's a phenomenon that is not just happening in the United States; it's global. It happened in China, it happened in United Kingdom, it happened in Europe, it happened in South America, happened everywhere.
But focusing on your comments with regards to the UK and stabbings in particular, it's kind of interesting because you're saying there's a particular profile that the United Kingdom, either the government and or the media is protecting. Do I understand that correctly?
That is correct. The vast majority of those are of immigrant origin. Um, they come from Muslim countries. If you go to the broader spectrum of violence in the United Kingdom and in Europe, the majority of these cases are revenge killings, revenge honor killings. And there are a lot of relationship between their condition and the country of origin and the origin of that violence.
Revenge killings in school?
Correct.
What's a revenge killing?
Well, it's very simple. When you have two groups of people and they are in conflict with each other, and one of them prevail for any chance out of the school, they may bring that grunge to the school, and revenge by stabbing or hurting that person in school is an act of revenge. Is that revenge killing?
So it sounds like a situation like that would be difficult to detect, whereas here in the United States, it's my understanding that there's a common psychological profile of these school shooters. Am I correct?
Yes. When you see the last cases of school shootings, specifically from Columbine to now, you can see that trait. You can see that the factors of mental health are prevalent on all of them. However, if we go to the broad context of school shootings, we got to go to the very core. The first school shooting in the United States happened in 1764, and we have been living as a nation with shooting in schools since really before we were a nation. So the motivations were different, but the school shootings and the violence in schools and education are being prevalent in our education system since the beginning, and not just here, but in a world context around the world.
So does that psychological profile, though, date all the way back pre 1776? And if so, what is the psychological profile of a school shooter in the United States of America?
As I mentioned, motivation are very difficult to establish when those years pass. We talk about 200-300 years ago. However, most of these cases they happened prior. Most of them that happened prior to Columbine were related. That were not directly related to mental health. Were related to cultural. Were related to unfairness in the school system. Remember that physical punishment was something documented and well known, and actually something that was encouraged in the education system in the beginning of this nation and around the world. We stopped doing that as a society by the end of the 50s. So right after World War II. You also, if you go to the broader context of this, you see the cases, the acceleration of cases of active shooters and violence in school right after military conflict. After the First World War, we have a peak. We have another peak right after Second World War. We have another peak right between the 60s and the 70s, where there were the experimentation with hallucinating drugs, and people were coming from the Vietnam War and Korea. We have a peak in cases. Now, when you go right now and what's happening after Columbine, it's a bit different. I've been studying that for a little bit, and I can tell you that this is some of the things that we found. Right after Columbine and in its 90s and the early 2000s, we have a cultural shift. We have studies that suggest that we were changing the way we were raising our kids. We try to be more understanding to them, and we try. There was a the intention to prevent the kids from feeling uh, how you say that from experience failure.
Right. This is like the culture where everybody gets a trophy, you're saying.
Correct. So if you
Similar to like Afghanistan around 9/11, all of those people that were within the Afghanistan culture, those guys would all the kids would win trophies, right?
uh,
Obviously being very sarcastic, right?
correct. So let me tell you what happens. So if you study the brain of a child from born to until you're 7 years old, you have to wire the brain paths, and you learn how to walk, you learn how to speak, you learn how to dexterity, how to interact with people, language learning, but you also learn how to deal with your emotions. When you give the participation awards that you mentioned to kids in that age, you are preventing them to feel what failure looks like. And life is part of that. Failure is part of life and part of growing. When you take that away from them, you are just raising individuals who do not have the toolkit to deal with failure. So you have young adults not equipped to deal with failure, than trying to learn in school what is supposed to be learning home. Remember that you form an individual in home. You go to school to get instructed, not form as an individual. When kids do not found that formation home, where do you think they go? They go to the school when they're not going to found it, or they go to social media now. In the last 20 years, they go to social media to learn that from there. And who is in giving those values? Who is giving that instruction specifically to people that not necessarily is equipped to deal with failure? When you put all these together, you have the perfect storm that we are seeing right now. If you go back to most of the cases that we have, these are kids with very low self-esteem, low values, very minimal values teach at home, and all of them, almost 100% of them, were dealing with why I'm failing. Where's my participation award?
So this part, so you're breaking down the psychological profile, the consistency that you just shared is established, right? I understand that. So you're not talking about really mentally ill people, according to what you just described. You're talking to people who might have low self-esteem, don't have a strong support system in their home, and have exposed themselves to other groups, other media, social media in school and beyond that are giving them this like killer instinct.
Yes. However, remember that the prevalence also, I mean, there is always a possibility to have somebody with a chemical imbalance in their brain,
Sure. But
undiagnosed,
you're saying that's the minority.
correct, undiagnosed schizophrenia will happen a lot in schools, more than what you think.
All right.
But at an early age, this is something that normally you will found in kids at a very, very early age. So it's easier to catch.
So Zev, like one of my guests, as you're aware, was Max Schachter. His son was killed in the Parkland shootings, and he indicated that there are early warning signs that there is essentially leakage. Where in that instance, that killer, that piece of garbage, went ahead and was basically bragging that he was going to do this for a long time prior to the shooting in social media. It was even like, I think if I remember correctly, I think even the FBI was put on notice beforehand. So if you're saying that you understand precisely what that killer profile is like, and if Max is correct with his analysis that there's leakage, that these killers are going to act beforehand, why can't we thread the needle? Why are we unable to start, to your point, at the root? I think that's the word you used. Get in the home, teach better values, give these people that are going to turn into future killers more security, more confidence, understand that what's right and what's wrong is important to live by. Why aren't we able to stop it in advance?
Well, let me tell you, that's a huge question. It's very difficult. It will be very difficult for me to tell you one thing, and this is I think is part of the problem. People try to oversimplify the solution of this. Let me tell you that there is a political problem here. There's also a cultural issue. Remember that right now, most of families in the United States, both parents work, and both parents work one or two jobs.
Is that the cultural issue?
That is a social issue.
Okay.
That is a social issue, but there's a
Okay.
cultural too, because we are shifting from being a industrial society to be a digital society. The amount of information that you got unfiltered out there that you can find
Oh,
in
I
in
know.
in in, in the media is overwhelming. But to your point, here in Florida, we and until very recent, almost a month ago, we have 7 years. We have 7 years when we prevent so many tragedies. 7 years after Stoneman Douglas, where all the political establishment, the law enforcement establishment, even the private establishment worked together, and we were very successful until a month ago. And I think we're still very successful. The rates of prevention that we have are very high because we bring mental health to the schools. We know the signs and we monitor social media through it and through. You have to understand that these individuals need that recognition because, again, they see themselves as failures and they want to demonstrate to everybody. Then they got to go in history by doing something. This is what the case of Nicholas Cruz and many others. Then they were looking for that. We are doing their game, their beat when we make them famous.
But I'm curious, just like hovering over that issue of social media and law, because there's a thread here that you're touching on with regards to social media and lawmakers, legislation. So I'm curious, like, has anyone within your industry or within government been able to like unequivocally prove that social media is playing a significant role in triggering these killers? And then take it a little further, is there any legislation in place that's really uh, basically stopping or mitigating the impact of social media on these killers?
Let me tell you, I don't want you to confuse the terms. It's not that the social media is triggering them. It's that the social media is the platform that they use to spread their message.
Okay,
Social media is also a platform that we use to early detect them and their intentions because they go to publish in social media because they need the recognition and they need exposure. Now,
I see.
I want you to keep it. You say something which is very, very important. In Florida, in order for you to operate a school after Stoneman Douglas, you have to have either the police or a certified safe school officer, somebody armed, trained, and certified in the school to protect the kids. Why that is important? Because if you go to statistics, a school shooting lasts 8 minutes. Every 8 seconds, somebody gets shot. And the response from the police in the United States is between 8 minutes to 10 minutes. That means that the police will arrive too late when everybody's dead and the shooter most likely will commit suicide. And when you go to the FBI, about 75% of the cases in 2023, that's what happened. Police arrived too late.
Including Uvalde, right? Isn't Uvalde, Texas, where it's my
Uvalde
understanding
was
that they
worse than
waited.
that.
It's my understanding that in Uvalde, 19 police officers were on premise at the school during the shooting for over an hour,
Correct.
and yet they just sat there dormant. They didn't go in for over an hour. And do you think, I know I'm jumping around here today with you, but this is a hot topic for me. I really get very passionate about it.
Me too.
Do you think that there should be, going back to the issue of legislation, do you think that there should be legislation enacted that holds those law enforcement officials accountable for failing to act?
Well, that's what happened in Stoneman Douglas. And after Stoneman
Correct.
Douglas, that legislation was approved in Florida. Even that legislation even regulate the person that I put as a private company, a safe school officer in the school to protect the school. If I fail to act, I will be arrested and I will be persecuted. That is something that you don't see across the board. I mean, you see it only in Florida. And this is
Yeah, why
part of
not?
the problem. The part of the problem is that we are at least 10 light years ahead of everybody in the nation in Florida.
I agree.
But I
I
still
agree.
don't understand why some other is knowing these numbers, some other states are failing to act. How
What do you think it is? Zev? Why do you
It's
think the states are
politics.
failing that?
It's
Because it's
absolutely
just
politics.
government. I mean, that's what, if law enforcement officials can't get into our schools to protect our children, our next generation, what's the value? That's the most precious asset that
That's
this
right.
nation has.
That's right.
So what's the issue? So tell me, like here in the state of New York, we don't have a law that holds law enforcement accountable in the event that there's a school shooter in a public school in New York City. The police officers aren't legally obligated to rush into the school and take that gunman out.
Correct. And we're supposed to learn in law enforcement after Uvalde, after Columbine.
Parkland. Oh,
After
Colin.
Columbine,
Wow.
all the way in
Yeah.
'99,
Yeah.
that was the failure in Columbine. That the police arrive and they make a perimeter and they try to negotiate with them. Well, they were killing people. After that, we learned that whoever arrived first to the scene have to enter. Somehow, in translation from 1999 to today, they lost that. We retake it after Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, make it legal in Florida. The key is this: as long as we let the state politicians handle this, nothing's going to happen. The only thing that is going to save the next generation is that we push for a federal mandate with the federal government go back into the state and says, no, 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 you cannot legally operate any school, private, public, charter, if you don't have somebody trained and certified armed to protect that school. And then you will go back to politics because some law enforcement, and I'm not saying all of them because we have very sympathetic sheriffs that understand the value of this, and they actually help us roll the law and pass the law in Florida to protect the schools. But some law enforcement says, no, no, this is a purview of law enforcement, and we are the only ones who are supposed to do it. We don't have enough people to do it, but we only the only ones who are gonna do it. That is a failure. That is a failure to the people. That is a failure to the kids that go to school and they do not sign to be in infantry and be in combat. And that is another thing. Those kids do not sign for that. We sign for that. We are the ones who are supposed to go there and protect them. You see, I'm a father, and I will die for my kids, and I will kill for my kids. And every time I'm protecting one schools, those kids in that school, they're my kids, and nobody mess with my kids. I want somebody like that to protect my kids. That's it. End of the story. No negotiations here. And I gotta tell you something, and it's not political, but I'm scared every time somebody from the government come to me and says, I'm here from the government, I'm here to help you. I am scared because normally
Why?
this is people who are not interested in me, they're interested in the number. And that is something to take away from this conversation. We need to act as a society and we need to push for this. There's no negotiations about it.
So Zev, I think it's interesting because what you're doing is really painting the picture of this ecosystem where there are different levels of touch points. Start with the killer, the shooter, begin at home, try to create a safe, supportive environment that is could create confidence and a certain level of support. But then when we look at legislation, are you calling for national policy as it relates to holding the state level law enforcement officials accountable? Because I think that would be overreaching. I don't think that the federal government could do that. And then one more thing, as it relates to gun carrying in schools, it's my understanding, and you'll know better than me, so correct me if I'm wrong, please, but it's my understanding that there's already 30 state laws within the United States of America that permit gun carrying in schools where they permit some sort of the staff one way or another to have a gun in 30 states already. So if that's accurate, and I'm going to defer to you on verifying my information, but if I'm accurate with that, wouldn't the federal government say like it's overreaching? We can't, that we don't have the legal authority to enforce local, state police to rush into a school shooting. And then second, the states are doing a good job. 30 out of the 50 states are already allowing for guns to be in the school to protect the children. What do you need national legislation for?
Well, let me tell you something. Every time I go to school and I see a police officer waiting outside doing a report in his patrol car in front of the school, or just watching Netflix because he come from another
Netflix.
job or whatever, it's a disservice to all of us. Actually, the other day I stopped walk by one and I asked him, "Let me ask you something. If you have an active shooter in school right now, what are you gonna do?" "Oh well, I will just rush in." "Oh really? Oh, let me ask you something. You know that when there's an active shooter inside the school, you won't hear the shots outside. And most likely that school is going to go into code red, which is a lockdown, and you will be locked outside." "Well, but I'm law enforcement." "Oh, okay." So that means that what the shield would make you naturally appear inside and you take care of the shooter? "No, no, no, no. I will. They'll open the door for me." "Oh, okay. Do you see me coming?" "No." "Okay. What about if I'm the gunman? I just shot you, and now I got to go inside to shoot everybody else. What are you gonna do?" So that is the problem, and his
So
responses are
that's
all the
one
time,
case.
and
That
he
was a police officer? Was
that's
that a
police
Florida
officer,
police?
and it
Yeah.
doesn't happen once; it happened a lot of time. So the problem for me is this: if this is the guy who's got to take care of my kids, who is going to protect my kids with his life, and he's just waiting outside, that is a disservice to all of us. The policy should be that your job is to be with the kids wherever the kids are. Meaning, if the kids are in the cafeteria, guess where you are. If the kids are in the field, where are you? If the kids are in classroom because we are on instructional hours, your job is to check that those doors are locked from the inside. Because if we have an active shooter today, I want to make sure that I contain it and I can shoot him, because if I am the only one protecting that school, and maybe that be a possibility. It's a high possibility of that. And the shooter get lucky and shot me and I'm dead. At least those doors are locked from the inside. And as an active shooter, normally do not shoot anything that they cannot see. If they cannot see me, I cannot penetrate that classroom. I will be safer. And then if they got me outside, like it happened in Stoneman Douglas.
Right. I
Now,
know.
the
I
other
know they covered the windows, right?
Correct, correct.
Right.
And there's a procedure for that. But again, that is a disservice. Now, going back to what you're saying, I'm not saying that the police is the only one who's supposed to do it. We have a program in Florida, and we particularly me, 99% of my employees are retired law enforcement veterans. Why? Because I need people who know what is to be in combat and what is to be armed most of their life, so I can train them to get to that level, to trade to that level. And I'm talking about people who can act, and I'm sure they're going to act in case something like this happen. Why I tell you that? Because we try to do the same thing, and we bring that from Israel. So a lot of teachers, because of the school location, they arm. But in Israel, everybody served 3 years. Everybody's an infantryman, trained. You don't have that luxury in the United States. We try to do that in Florida, and we have several teachers trying to attempt to do this, shooting themselves in the range in front of the sheriff, which is the people who were um, um, uh, training them and certifying them. And then you have the other ones who just cannot pass because the level. So I'll give you an example. School in the beginning of this program in Florida, police officers have to, in order to be in the street, you have to qualify at 15 yards at 75% of accuracy. To be a safe school officer or a guardian, you have to shoot at 25 yards, 85% of accuracy. Why? Because I am not supposed to be shooting somebody in the street. I'm supposed to shoot somebody with a weapon in a classroom full of kids, with kids behind, kids in front, or in between, teachers, people, innocent people. You own every bullet that you shoot. So I have to shoot better than a police officer to be in school. If we put those concepts, if we put those standards very, very high, I'm quite sure that we can protect all the schools. We got to create jobs. We got to bring a lot of veterans that are right now looking for a purpose in life and this is a good purpose. We are protecting life. We're protecting kids. Keep saying that because when people talk about security and say, I can care less about any vehicle parked outside the school, insurance will pay for that. There is no insurance in the world who is going to pay for a second of your life, and more important than the life of the kids and the staff in the school. That is what we are here to protect life. If we go with that mentality and we create a federal mandate where you cannot operate a school if you don't have either law enforcement or a certified safe school officer in that location, you will see the difference because a lot of these shootings happen because the kids know and the perpetrators know there's nobody to respond. They are mine.
So, Zev, you mentioned Israel. I know your background is Israeli, and you were trained in the IDF. Israel obviously has a mandatory military service, but is there any type of similar legislation? If I understand, as far as Israel, there are like zero school shootings. Is that accurate?
Yes. Um,
Okay. So if there are zero school shootings in Israel, is that because of the military training that the entire society goes through, or is it because there's existing legislation in Israel that is working on a national level better than here in the United States?
both. And I also need to add that for us is life or death. Is our life, and we are in a constant threat. So the mindset that you have when you're taking your kids to schools is that
We meaning Israelis.
correct. You got to be very critical. You got to be very critical of where am I taking my kids? Is this guy able to do that? If he's sitting in his car or he's sitting in an office doing nothing or just passing by because he's a warm body with a uniform and a pistol, that is what you need to ask as a parent. But because we are more self-aware, because we see the carnage and we see the killings and we're more sensitive to that, I think it's part of again the cultural shift that we
So
need
it's
to do.
training, military background for the entire society, coupled with strong legislation that permits what in Israel? Guns in schools?
To permit the right people, either the teacher or the or the guard or the police, to be protecting that school.
And over here in the United States, there's no federal mandate, there's no federal legislation that provides that public schools they must have armed guards, armed protection for the students, administrators, teachers, etc.
Not just public schools, charter schools, private schools, any education, any education institution have to have one.
Zev, is there any movement in Congress? Are there any Congress people behind trying to organize a bill or pushing a bill through on this topic?
I'm pushing right now. I wrote a white paper about school safety that we're pushing right now to some state representatives to bring to Washington. In and our expectation is that it moves some the people with power that I hope the president can see it and see the benefit of this because this is hurting our nation. This is hurting our kids, and the kids are the future. This is the people. I make a joke, but I'm guarding the kids who are going to push my wheelchair when I am an old man. I hope they are there and they are alive and they're sane because this is also affecting the rest of the kids. They don't feel safe in school.
Which Florida congressperson is supporting you, is advocating on behalf of that movement?
Well, we I give this to Senator Rubio right before I sent it to his office, right before he was going to the Department of State.
Yeah,
Um, um, we try to keep in contact with them, but again, it's something
he's
that we
busy.
are trying to.
Yeah. Yeah. So going back to the police officer, the guard, I'm kind of fascinated by the picture that you painted. You walk up to the school just recently, like was that like a week or so ago, and
No,
you tap on
this been
you
happening. This has been happening in multiple occasions. In
so you
multiple.
tap on the cop's door, right? It's like actual it's a police officer. You tap on his door, and then I think you have three different issues with that person, right? You have policy, which we're kind of touching on, legal policy. Um, Then you have training, right? I think you touched on that issue, but it's my understanding, going back to Parkland for a minute, cowardice. Like the person that was hired at Parkland, or I believe it was a governmental official, if I'm correct, the first
It was a
person who was
sheriff
there
deputy.
on,
It was a
he
sheriff
was
deputy.
scared, right? Didn't he hide behind a wall the entire time? He was a coward. So how do you get over that issue? So we talked on legislation, we talked about training. How do you get over the cowardice?
It's a great topic, and Deputy Peterson is the one who actually hide there, and you have
Yeah.
even worse case in Uvalde, where 19 police officers were just like staying there doing nothing. I have the recordings of the one of the girls who was survived the initial shooting, calling his dad and telling, "I can hear the police outside. Why didn't come in and kill this guy?" Um, Listen, number one, make it a offense, a criminal offense with a mandatory minimum sentence of at least 10 years for not acting. Number two, make sure that when you hire people, you don't hire it as a career, as a path to a um, uh, retirement. Because that's what happened with Officer Peterson. When Deputy Peterson was there was I think it was a couple days before retirement, and he said,
Yeah, I understand that too.
I'm not risking my retirement for anybody."
Right.
Um,
Insane. Terrible.
Correct. And more importantly, you need people with connection with kids. I as I
I
told you,
agree.
I'm a father. My kids are irreplaceable. As a son, when I see my kids now, I understand why my dad loved me so much, and I why when I don't call home, I was such a stupid guy. And I think that's something that parents need to understand. You need to have somebody as a parent. You need somebody mature. You need somebody who knows the value of these kids and interact with the kids and and make their kids their own. Because when you care, you will do. And as a parent, I tell you, I will die for my kids and I will kill for my kids in a heartbeat.
All right, but we don't have parents running security at these schools right now. But let me shift gears for a minute. After 1996, at the you might be familiar with the Dunblane massacre. I believe that was in the United Kingdom, and soon thereafter in Port Arthur, Australia. The UK and Australia banned handguns entirely. Obviously we have a Second Amendment issue here in the United States, which, I obviously support. And I know your position. Clearly, you're pro Second Amendment, and you believe that as it relates to school safety and protecting our next generation, guns are absolutely necessary. However, I want you to make a straw man argument in favor of removing guns. Can you, if you had to switch sides here for a minute, I know this is tough. I'm sorry to surprise you, but if you had to switch sides, like what's the opposite side saying, Zev? Like with a straight face straw man argument, what would you say the reason is to get rid of guns?
You
Sorry.
put me in the spot, and I want to tell
Yeah.
you something. No, number one, I do not make the argument of not removing guns lightly. I just being practical, and I am a person of data. I want to collect the data. The amount of guns in the streets right now in the United States is so high, and right now you have another problem, which is the 3D printing. Right now you can print a gun. Almost anywhere, and in Europe, is being flooded right now with people with 3D printing guns, and it's just a moment. It's a matter of time when you're gonna have attacks.
It's a real issue. I
A
don't know
real
if you
issue.
know, but I had on my show here on some future day. Are you aware we had the Queens County DA?
Yeah.
And that's she has the highest success rate of pulling back 3D printed guns in the country. It was a major topic. And she admitted on the show, you can, if you're listening, if you're viewing, you go back and watch. DA Katz admitted that law enforcement and legislation cannot keep up with 3D printed guns. The guns are not detectable in traditional ways, and it's a real issue. They're designing them, like Hello Kitty guns now, and they're shooting as hard as iron guns.
You know that I want to tell you something that is impact us a lot. Last year we confiscated 27 guns, just us as a company from schools in Florida. And part of that success is that we introduced a K9, a weapon detection animal, and it's being absolutely successful. The amount of weapons and we confiscate. And by the way, we confiscate most of these weapons in second chance schools, where the weapons were not brought to campus necessarily to shoot anybody, but these are kids who live in tough neighborhoods where weapons are self-protection. If you don't have one, you may be a victim. And we get all these weapons from the peripheria of the school and dumpsters and bushes and all that kind of stuff.
What percentage were 3D printed?
Not many. I will
Right.
say less
Not
than
detect.
two.
Right. Is that
Less
because you
than two.
can't detect
And
it?
the question is that the 3D printing guns which I saw so far are so well printed that it's going to be very very difficult to distinguish from a real one.
Yes.
Because you have parts of real guns, so you don't really know which one is what.
But they don't need that now. Like, not all 3D printed guns need to have the iron pieces. It's my understanding,
That's
according to
correct.
a colleague in the DA's office here in New
That's
York
correct.
City.
That's
Yeah.
correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
We haven't found anyone so far that is 100% 3D printing. But we do have found a lot of knives also.
Yeah.
It's funny. Sometimes we even prevent the distribution of drugs because kids don't even know the difference. So when they saw the dog, you start seeing uh, uh, young age boys and girls going to the bathroom to dispose of all the drugs that they have on them because they really don't know why we have the dog there. Anyway, going back to the topic of the weapons, I it's very difficult for me to find any argument on that. In a sense that other than making more restrictive, the bad guys and bad actors are always going to have access to guns. They're going to find a way. It's like any other problem. If you don't found it, you found it in the black market. You got to just make it more expensive and more difficult to get it. But if I need it, I will. And we haven't talked yet about terrorism, which is unfortunately, I have to tell you, is coming to the United States. It's a matter of time when we have a terrorist attack in the United States. And I fear it's not going to be necessarily a weapon attack. It's going to be more ramming, like it's happening in Europe. It's coming to the United States. It's going to happen. Um, um, I can tell you that in our communication with Homeland Security and the FBI, we all are aware of that.
Zev, are you saying that U.S. Homeland Security is telling your organization currently that we're under threat of a terrorist attack imminently?
We've been in a threat of terrorist attack since 9/11, and we still
Mhm.
are.
You think
Um,
that there are like cells embedded in major cities like New York, LA,
Absolutely,
Miami?
absolutely.
So what are they waiting for?
Well, let me tell you what we fear. We fear a massive attack. Just imagine for 1 second that you organize low tech 4, 5, 6 attacks, some of them with weapons, in let's say schools or medical institutions, hospitals, and you attack at the same time in the same city. There is no police department in the United States who have enough resources to actually dispatch to all places at the same time. So some of them we know we will left fend by themselves, by whatever they have at hand, the security or the assigned police officer to that location. And that is a problem. That is something, it's a strong possibility that's going to happen. And I know law enforcement is trying to prevent that. We trying to prevent that, giving all the tools necessary to our officers and our personnel who is assigned to schools and educational institutions and everywhere, all the tools necessary to hold in place and be able to deal with any threat as much as possible before the police arrive. Why? Because we cannot guarantee that the police is going to be there in 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 10 hours. We just don't know.
So, Zev, it's interesting because like a lot of people argue that media coverage fuels the fire for killers in school settings. But since you took us out of schools for a minute, what do you think is going on as it relates to media coverage and terrorism, perhaps domestically? Like, for example, people might not like to see some of the political rhetoric coming from the left and the right. People might, there's obviously a lot of hatred for President Trump, notwithstanding the fact that a majority of the country voted for him. There are policies in place that are maybe taxing on people's savings, their 501c3s, the tariffs, excuse me, not their 501c3s. The, the tariffs are hitting people's life savings. Um, there are a lot of issues at play right now. Do you think these media outlets could be fueling some level of animosity that will also cause uh, shootings and encourage like domestic terrorism and violence of this nature?
Well, I consider all these attacks to Tesla, for example, domestic terrorism. Personally,
The Teslas.
the Teslas. I think that's domestic terrorism. However, I think the issue goes more wider than just politics. Is obviously the sensation of creating this animosity. I think we should use more judgment, be more specific, and more adult, and more responsible for what we publish. The other thing is, and this is super important. I think we diminishing the risk that we have as a society of fueling hatred. I'm a Jew. My kid it was target while the beginning of the war in Gaza in his university, as long as any other student, just because they were Jewish.
Which university?
He was an FIU, and hopefully they act very swiftly and decisively in the school, and to prevent any further acts of that. But the reality is that some of the schools and some of the things that I saw are completely disconnected from reality.
Well, I mean, you just saw we're shooting this on what's today, Thursday, May 8th, I think it
Correct.
is. So you just saw last night, I don't know if you're aware, Zev, but right here in New York City, there was a big event again, pro Hamas in Colombia, in their library, on the streets. And I don't know if you're aware of this one, but um, Kanye dropped a song last night in the middle of the night, like 3, 4 in the morning on social media, and I believe the song's title is Heil Hitler. Have you seen this?
Yes, unfortunately I saw it, and
Yeah,
what is shocking to me is, and we
it's
all live in
catchy. I mean, it's a song, honestly, like it's a cat. I
we
hate to
we
say it.
we
It's a
living
catchy song. These kids are gonna play it.
I got it. We living in the 21st century, and it's mind blowing to me that we are discussing this after everything happened in the past century. This is something that I thought it was is a matter already solved, and that we already discussed it. And even in the other countries, there's some of them I hear the local media talking about the Holocaust and why it happened and why it was terrible and horrible, and then all of a sudden we forgot about that. And young kids who know nothing about the reality on the ground, the hate and the Jewish state and what is to be a Jew and what is to be a minority, it's like we forgot that. And the shocking part is that the teachers, the instructors, the people in charge in those universities forgot about that too.
Well, we're also going through a transformative moment on a global scale. So, like again, our conversation's been isolated to school shootings, period. But since you're expanding, I mean, another thing that caught my attention is that today the Prime Minister of France, Macron, welcomed a former Al Qaeda, like just a repackaged Al Qaeda leader in Al Jalani or Al Shara, which is his new name. He's even repackaging his name. He walked in with his sharp cut suit. He looks like Tom Ford. And, Macron's, I don't know if you caught this, Macron stopped him and turned him to the cameras and they shook hands. And he's welcoming, a known terrorist into the halls of, France's government.
The pragmatism of being a politician is not shocking to me. I see it in real life, especially when you are following orders, and sometimes those orders don't make any sense because they are politically motivated. I can tell you that how the families of the victims, because he's a perpetrator, how feel when they are legitimized by the French government.
And he's wiping out, like as we're talking, he's wiping out the entire Druze population in Syria. I'm sure you're aware. It's like he's just like
Correct.
literally shredding the Druze culture, beautiful people, like wonderful people,
That's right.
and he's just shredding them in Syria right now. I believe, actually, in fact, Israel sent them armaments
Yeah,
to
we,
protect
we we
themselves.
remember that we have a very special relationship with the Druze community. They were they were marginalized and persecuted by the Muslim majority in that region, and we have a special connection with them because we know what it is. Kind of when you're being persecuted, you tend to side with the persecuted most of the time, and this is one of those cases. And some of them even serve in the IDF. I serve for some of them, and they're wonderful people, great
Yeah, I know.
communities, great
Amazing people.
community.
Zev, just to take that thread a little further, but tying it back to children and American children in particular, these current, like the modern day terrorist is infiltrating a lot of different areas, including gaming and social media. So we started off our conversation and we analyzed for a second how social media is impacting kids to inspire them to become school shooters. But I think there's also a level of caution that parents and families need to know about, which is these terrorists are now going into these friend groups in Roblox and Minecraft, all over gaming, all over social media. They're befriending and influencing for sympathy towards these terrorist groups. It's a whole different level of terrorism. It's soft power terrorism that we're witnessing, that we're experiencing right now.
Yes.
They're influencing American kids to have sympathy for terrorist killers.
I cannot agree more with you. It's brainwashing, in my opinion, because it make it cool. It make it cool to be a freedom fighter. Remember, they are not terrorists for them; they're freedom fighters. It doesn't matter the how many people, how many innocents you kill. It just matters the results for them. And it is disheartening when I saw or some of these persecuted minorities, like the other day I saw some people talking about the apartheid state in Israel when Arabs in Israel can have an opinion. We have legislators. We have people in Congress in Knesset in Israel. They are Arabs with Arab parties, and they vote and they have same rights that any other Israeli because they are Israelis. What are you talking about? The disconnection between this and reality is appalling. Appalling.
So, Zev, it's we're living in a very disjointed time period. I think that your fight for school safety is admirable, but I think it's going to become increasingly difficult. I mean, we've touched on so many different layers with regards to profiling school shooters, to the line of defense, whether it's the private sector like your company and your primary focus, or the public sector, legislation, technology, media. I mean, there's so many different touch points, and it's like this whole world is this disjointing right now even further. I think it's going to be more complicated to protect our youth and protect the next generation. Zev, with every episode, I end in a similar way. I have named this show Some Future Day. It's a James Joyce reference. I don't know if you're a
Yes,
James Joyce fan. If you are, I commend you. You have a crazy mind then, like me. But I'd like to bring you into that world and wrap this baby up with that process. Are you in?
absolutely.
All right. So in some future day, American public, the American adults will be able to protect the next generation in school settings by
Providing a safe school, a safe location in their school for kids to grow and become better than our current generation.
Zev. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience today before we wrap this up? I know I said that was the last question, but I've cut you off a million times today, and I love you. So give me, if there's anything else that you want to top it off with, the floor is yours.
We have a responsibility with our kids, our future generations. We need to be vigilant, commit ourselves to be vigilant, to request, to demand our elected officials and school administrators to do everything. They are the one responsible for the safety of our kids. It breaks my heart every time I talk to parents and they go to school and they talk to me and says, I don't know if I got to see my kids tonight. I want to have dinner with them. How I know they're going to come back. That is disheartening. It's in our power, in this generation, it's in our power to solve this problem, committing the necessary funding and the necessary legislation to the state and federal levels to protect our kids. It is reprehensible that we have elected officials expecting us to send our kids to schools with nobody can protect them because there's no police, there's no security, there's nothing. We need to prevent the next tragedy, and this is the only way we can do it.
Zeev, you're doing very important, godlike work. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for everything, and thank you for joining me today on Some Future Day.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Some Future Day. I know your time is super valuable, so I hope you learned how you can leverage emerging technology to improve your life. And exciting news, my new book, Some Future Day, How AI is Going to Change Everything, is now available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, and other major booksellers across the globe. I'm so proud to share that because of your support, the book topped the charts. It became #1 bestseller in cryptocurrency, #1 bestseller in artificial intelligence, and #1 bestseller in robotics. So, if you're curious and ready to learn how AI can enhance your career, your community, and your family, get yourself a copy today.